So Toby already has his ear pierced once, but can't really tell because it's very small and his ear is very small and his sideburns are clear. But he has already one earlobe piercing, so we're going to do a second one. So the first step is to make sure you have proper equipment, like clean gloves and tools, piercing needles, whatnot. If you don't have gloves or can't get to gloves, at least wash and disinfect your hands thoroughly. Second, make sure you're calm and relaxed before you start a piercing or get pierced yourself. Because if you poke somebody the wrong way, it's not going to be very fun. You can screw up the piercing and cause scarring or get an infection if you don't pierce right. If you're going to shake or fidget, make sure to leave yourself some time to have a breather before you engage in the piercing, especially if you're doing it on yourself. Step 3. Only use clean, sterilized jewelry and brand new needles. Don't reuse needles, and do not use sewing needles or safety pins, God forbid. I have used both of these, and I would say use normal piercing needles because they work the best and are the least painful. Using sewing needles and safety pins also causes more damage to your ear and tissue than normal piercing needles. So it's more painful if you get them done with something that isn't a piercing needle. Before you start piercing or doing any marking on skin, you'll want to put any hair up that you have, especially if you have long hair, like we see here. Make sure you alcohol swab the skin and the surrounding area so that you know it's disinfected and clean before putting on your marker and before putting on your clamp. So, when you're marking the earlobe, make sure the person getting pierced is able to see and double check with them to make sure the placement is correct so that nobody's unhappy after this happens. The next step is to clamp where your piercing is going to be. You can use cheap clamps off of, say, eBay or Amazon or something that are plastic like this, but you really don't want to use those because they are not reusable and they are really janky and they will not hold properly in some cases. I use metal forceps myself because they are reusable and you can easily sterilize them. After you have the tissue or the piercing site clamped, you can use a hair tie or an elastic or a rubber band to secure them in place so that they're not locked, but they will still grip onto the skin without you holding onto them. You want to make sure you have the proper size jewelry before you pierce. So a 14 to 14 gauge or a 16 to 16 and the equivalents. So make sure you do a countdown before you do a piercing so that the person getting pierced knows when it's going to happen so they can take a breath in and a breath out after. Make sure you also put down a tissue below where the piercing site is so if the piercing does bleed, you won't get it on any clothing or make a mess. After the piercing, make sure the jewelry is put inside the piercing so it's a seamless transition from needle to piercing jewelry. Make sure to clean off any visible blood off of the piercing after it's done.